At Vincis, winning is everything, and you will not win if they cannot remember what was in your presentation. They don't make the decision there and then. They make it a week, a day, a month, maybe a year after you present. So they are making their decision not on the content of your presentation, but entirely on what can they remember about the content of your presentation. So we have 5 techniques that are designed to help increase your ability to have your prospects remember the reasons for buying off you. Now we have a mnemonic to help you remember those 5. It's called CRAVE, but they are chunking, relevance, association, visualization, and elaboration. Well, this is actually a form of chunking. Instead of remembering all 5, we're collapsing it to one word for you to remember, CRAVE, and that will then help you remember the other 5. So C in CRAVE is actually chunking. One of the exercises we do if we're live is I show people that I can get them to remember my mobile number by cutting it up into bits and having them remember sequences. We'll come back to the 426 a little bit later in this video. But by cutting it up into bite-sized chunks and then repeating it, etc., you can get people to remember large, complex things. Well, you should do that in your presentation, particularly a sales presentation. Break it down to 4 or 5 things that you want them to remember and chunk the presentation around those things. And what you do is double or treble recall. So that's chunking. Relevance is interesting because the brain processes information differently if it understands the relevance. So here, if I'm trying to teach somebody how to put screws or bolts in, they need a spanner, whereas if they're trying to put a nail in, they need a hammer. So the hammer is not relevant to this, the spanner is. And the reason we do this is that the research behind this was about getting people to remember a list of 15 actions. And if you gave them the list and didn't tell them what it was, they remembered about 17%. But as soon as you told them this is a laundry process for doing your laundry, that doubled up to 36, 37%. Well, that's important. What that means is if you're a presenter, you need to tell people why you're showing them information and why it's relevant, and what that will do is double their recall. It also means that you shouldn't have anything on your slides that isn't strictly relevant to the information you're telling them. So the more you can declutter it, the more you can get rid of everything that might not be absolutely relevant, the smaller the content, the more control you have over it. That's relevance. Association is kind of the difficult one to explain, but if you can get people to remember things by linking them to things they already know, it's much easier. So I want you to remember the sequence 426 in my mobile number. Actually, if I show you that 4 plus 2 equals 6, then you're much more likely to remember the sequence. Actually, when I was teaching this to my 5-year-olds so that they could remember my number, we used the dice and we got them to roll the dice until they rolled a 4, a 2, and a 6. And that exercise means they were never, ever forgot 426 as the sequence. All I had to say was roll the dice and they would remember 426. That's association, because we're linking it to something they already know. Good example from a sales environment is if you know that somebody has a problem and then you show them the solution, by reminding them that these two things link together, massively increase the chances that they will remember and recall you and your solution because they already know that they've got a problem. Visualization, there's a whole video about this that you can watch, which will show how we turn bullet points into this diagram, but we know that we double recall and double attention if you draw a diagram. And that's because sound and text is processed on the left-hand side of the brain. Diagrams are processed on the right-hand side of the brain by using both hemispheres. That's dual encoding, different modalities. What that does is massively increase. John Sweller down at the University of New South Wales has categorically proven that it doubles or trebles recall when we just apply it to a presentation. Now, the last one is elaboration. Now, elaboration is basically repetition. You all know that repetition works as a mnemonic because that's how you've remembered your phone number or remembered your credit card details or remembered whatever. You write it down 1,000 times, you're going to remember it. You know that. Elaboration is a subtle difference. Instead of just writing it down like we've done here, you build on it and you show different links to it. And if you build on the story each time, you make it more interesting, you show different connections, that makes it much more likely to synthesize and move them to long-term memory. There's a bit of an art to it, but if you do it well, you can massively increase the chances that the audience, who are passive passengers on this, they're not actively trying to remember your presentation, we are taking them through a process that is designed to have them remember it without their active involvement. CRAVE fundamentally quadruples their ability to remember and recall the information in the presentation. And how do we know that? Well, because we've tested it. We worked with some psychologists at UCLan and we baselined what happens when you put together a 20-minute presentation for undergraduates. We did it with a video, and behind that video we just put the static pictures. And then we took exactly the same green screen video, but this time did it the way you're watching it now, with moving pictures and me in front of it. And what we found was an increase based in the lab, kind of, published, peer-reviewed. We've managed to show that these techniques increase recall by 350%. If you are in L&D, learning and development, then obviously that's important because students are there to learn. And if you understand how to present information in a way that makes them pay attention and makes them remember it, you're a better teacher. But for salespeople, if they can remember who you are and why to buy off you, it massively increases the chances that they're going to buy off you and not your competition, which means that your chances of winning are at least 350% more than your competition. And we think that's important because at Vincis, we think winning is everything.